welcome everybody to the summer school, Digitalization and Platformization of Social Words. This summer school is the result of a collaboration, a joint collaboration between the University of Bologna and the Indian Institute of Technology of Kanpur, which also gave birth to a research group with the same name, the Digital Sociology International Research Group. So the summer school will be on during all these weeks, from the 2nd of May to the 6th of May. And today we have the pleasure to host, to start the kickoff event with Professor Jillet from the Indian Institute of Technology Kanpur and Professor Piergiorgio Degli Esposti from the University of Bologna, and with a contribution that is entitled Reflecting on Digital Prosumption and Digital Money Phenomena. Then we have a break of some hours, so this contribution will be of about 2 hours. And then we'll host Professor Stefano Spillari, which I think will join us in a few minutes, with his contribution from civic food networks to civic food platforms from the University of Bologna as well. Then the next days we'll have many guests, which we are really honored to host. We'll have Cornelia Han tomorrow morning, and also again Professor Sam with Professor Jamucek from the University Nicolaus Copernicus University of Turin. And then in the afternoon at around 5 p.m. Italian time, we'll have Professor Chris Bale from the Duke University. After that, we'll have also on Wednesday, Professor Fabio Bravo from the University of Bologna, Roberto Barbeito from the Universidad Complutense de Madrid, Professor Montanari from the University of Bologna again. And then on Thursday, we'll have the pleasure to host Gert Lovink with a blended event. Okay, we have some new hosts. And then after Gert Lovink's event, we'll have Martin Kenney from the University of California, Davis, always in the afternoon. The last day will be with 2 concluding events, hosting we're hosting Anne Kaun from the Södertörn University of Stockholm. And also we'll conclude the summer school with the contribution of Professor Venkatraman from the Indraprastha Institute of Information Technology of Delhi. And we'll conclude the event with all the summer school with a wrapping up things conclusion debate, which we will be pleased to host every participant in an open discussion for a really insightful change of ideas and contribution. So welcome everybody again, and I leave the floor to Professor Degli Esposti and Professor Sam. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon for who is following us from India, and I'm glad of having such an opportunity. And before beginning, I would like to make a brief history of how me and Jillet met and how the whole project started. It was the 2009, and we met at the UMD University, attending classes from Professor George Rither, who at the time was mostly studying the topic of prosumption and the early digitalization process, who was at the time literally an emerging phenomenon, considering that the big boom of Facebook and the so-called digital platform we will analyze later were just beginning, and the boom of Facebook was 2008, so just 1 year before. And the iPad and all the iThing we have in our pocket, desk, and wherever at the time were basically not existing. So from that time and on, we started some scientific reflection upon this topic on different area and different geographic context. And then a few years ago, our life crossed again, and we started this project called Unibo IITK Digital Society Research Group, with the objective of analyzing the peculiarity of the process of digitalization, both in Italy and India, but in a more complex environment, I would say, because mostly the idea of the geographic distinction, of course, they do have meaning. And I mean, geography is a strong bound, locality and typicity of space are, of course, very bonding and very important in our social relation, in our social context. But what is more and more evident is the emerging of what may be called as a third space, which is this digital hybrid space we are living and we have been forced to live because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But it was just, I mean, the pandemic was just an enhancer, a magnifier of something that was already there anyway, you know. So we become completely dependent on digital platform because of that, because in a peculiar moment in history, those were the only things and social structure keeping us attached to our regular way of life. But also we realized that our way of life, our classical way of life, has been definitely changed toward the direction that, let's say, mainstream disseminator define as new normality and interaction between physical and digital space. These and other reflection will be part of today's lesson. And let's say those are the red line of the whole summer school. On my end, I will discuss mostly about the relationship between consumer, or I would prefer to use the term prosumer, and consumer platform in general. So I'm talking about consuming good, consuming service, and other than that, of course, also producing and consuming value and content on digital platform. On the other hand, Jillet will discuss and introduce us into the world and domain of digital money and digital currency along the environment of platformization. So Jillet, if you would like to introduce yourself and of course, whatever you want to say.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our summer school. I think Piergiorgio has given a very succinct sort of mapping of our interaction with each other, which really started off in the context of platforms. And I think some indications of the topics that we would be covering now, the seeds of that were already sown, you know, when we started talking in 2009. And our intention in organizing this particular summer school is to really speak in depth and get to know about the different types of work that not only seasoned scholars in the study of platforms are doing, but we'll be very, very interested in the kind of research projects that you yourselves are focusing on. So really the intention here is to organize discussions in the fashion of a round table, and we hope that that there are some really productive conversations that come out of the interaction between people who are experts in the field and others who have really some very fresh insights that they're getting from new research that they're starting. And as Piergiorgio mentioned, in today's session we will be focusing on looking at digital platforms and what we call really the emerging platform society. When we refer to digital platforms, what are we talking about? How are they shaped, and how do they shape social interaction itself? Those are some aspects that we will cover. So we'll be discussing two strains, one looking more from the consumption side and the other looking more from the aspect of money. Of course, they're also related to each other. The other thing to consider is that, and I think that's the advantage of really having this kind of an international collaboration, is that we hope that you will get insights from a variety of different geographical regions in the world, because one of the things that I'm sure you may have found as you started observing your own, or starting your own research, is a lot of discussion happens on the new things or the big changes that platforms get into our world, right? So the radical change that a platform is supposed to introduce into our lives. However, and that is, I think, the beauty of empirical research, the more empirically grounded research shows us that there's also a lot of continuity. So platforms really interact with and in some ways place themselves atop of existing social relations and structures. So we are anticipating that, and because these social structures are different in various parts of the world, we are anticipating that some of these connections and continuities will also come out very clearly as part of our discussions throughout the next 5 or 6 days. So I welcome you all, and I hope that it's a productive session. I'll turn to Pierre, and he'll give you more details on how we plan to go about doing the session. Over to you, Pierre.
Okay, can you hear me? I tend to switch off the mic on and on when other people are talking, and sometimes I just forget to switch it on. Sorry about that. So, as Jillet already said, we would like to have an open interaction with each other, and so having literally a class structured as a round table. So feel free to jump in, raise your virtual hand or physical hand whenever you prefer to say something and comment something, ask whatever, and then we will try to drift the lesson toward the direction of clarifying doubt and reply to every insight that will come from the classroom. About today's lesson, the first thing I think we should analyze, and let me share my screen for Laura. Can you activate my screen sharing, please? Okay, because I have to. So I should no. Okay, now.
You should be able to.
Okay, I'm the host now, and so I should share my screen. I would like to start briefly introducing the main notion, or I mean, the elephant in the room, we would say, and defining and discussing what platforms are, starting from the ubiquitous platform, the so-called GAFAM, that are Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. But I mean, the acronyms may even change if you consider that some of these big companies, those of big tech giant, have recently changed their names, such as Facebook is Meta, and Google, in the broader way, is considered as Alphabet. But it's not a matter of an acronymus. I think that GAFAM is way more than appropriate in order to describe the context, the physical and digital context in which we are living. And what is important about this platform, we named as ubiquitous platform, is that we are almost forced to have an interaction with at least one of them each and every day. Like we are dependent on them because not just because of our purchase, if we are thinking about Amazon, also we rely, the whole university system on a global scale, let's say, mostly relies on Microsoft server and Microsoft infrastructure. Such an example, Microsoft Teams for delivering virtual teaching, or almost every university email account is managed by this huge giant of the IT. Facebook, of course, Facebook in a broader way, it's the platform that manage, by some extent, all the social interaction of people on the global scale. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, and of course, it's also WhatsApp. And whenever you use one of these apps, you can detach that at the bottom of the app you are using is written the WhatsApp. It's part of the Meta company and so forth. And I mean, the point is that those huge platforms are the one through which we are dependent on our connection and our interaction in the digital space. And by some extent, they also play the role of the so-called Weberian bureaucracy in the modern age. Those are the ones who certify our identity whenever we wish to access to other service, whenever we wish to activate what is called API, the application protocol that allow the connection between two different apps and allows the transfer of data between one platform and the other. So those subjects, that we define as platform, are playing a very fundamental role in the process of identifying people. But more than that, I think it's a matter of literally giving a structure, a bureaucratic structure to the digital world. That's the very fundamental role in a perspective that those platforms are playing. And I mean, the main difference is between the classical bureaucratic structure Max Weber talked to us when he was discussing about modernity, is that the classic bureaucracy, by some extent, has some pitfall and has some level of falsification, which is very hard to be found on a digital platform. Of course, you can always activate like a fake account, a dummy account in one of these platforms. For sure, you can do that. But what is definitely important, and I think we have not to underestimate, is that every time we log literally in one of these platforms, not apps, but platforms, we literally leave a digital footprint of our activity along a server run by a private corporation. So we have to, on a broader way, discuss the fact that the process of bureaucratization in the first wave of modernity, so we are talking about industrial revolution and so on and so forth, was basically managed by nation state and its bureaucratic structure. Nowadays, those bureaucratic structure, for the time where the ultimate advance, of course, of social control, but nowadays things are completely changed. Firstly, because those are private-owned corporations, and this is definitely a game changer, okay? Secondly, because those platforms have very little, let's say, way of being falsified. I mean, a margin of falsification, of course, is possible. But the idea is, and I'm literally quoting Kevin Kelly when he made the parallel between the internet and the global copy machine, is literally related to the fact that those platforms are making copies and copies of our interaction between us and them. And that's literally very important. I mean, those are also called the digital footprint, and those digital footprint create an enormous value, literally an economic value, and also this information can, by some extent, let's say, help this company and other, of course, to which this company resell their information to deliver forecast model of behavior. That's very important. I'm not just speculating like, conspiracy theorist or something like that. Stanford University recently revealed that all these corporation or this company have a very sophisticated way of doing research of our behavior, literally, even through the microphone and recording our conversation throughout the microphone of our smartphone or of our personal assistant. And this is not by case that if you talk about something with someone at the phone or with your Alexa devices, that in the future days you will receive target advertised about that microwave or that fridge or whatever it is, So literally, it's the point is that this platform are grounding a system of control, mostly upon the fact that this system of control is needed to fuel and enhance consumption, of course. And by some extent, I don't want to take at the moment a personal position about the fact that this is good or this is bad, but for sure this is something that on one end streamline efficiency, the efficiency of the process of consumption. So like literally it's the idea or the marketer dream of having and mapping the desire immediately when it jumps in the mind of the consumer. So literally you can immediately find a path to satisfy the need. But very lastly, before switching my slide and scrolling my slide presentation, is another reflection. Before I told you that the idea is this platform are setting up a bureaucratic system, and those are private-owned corporations. The other peculiarity is that all these private corporations are owned by American capital. Okay, those are all global corporations, but all these corporations have their headquarters on the US, and that is kind of important. I mean, there is a list of the most profitable platform, and just to find a significant digital platform in the top 100 platform on earth, you have to reach the 16th spot, which is Spotify, which is the first European one platform that is, that is run by European capital. And this is also important because at the beginning of our reflection, we talked about the fact of related to geolocation. I mean, geolocation in space is fundamental because at the moment, it's true that we are living a kind of global digital society, but rule and regulation still belong to nation states or union, European Union, US or whatever. And that's kind of important because sometimes happen that Facebook in a certain geographic context, it's ruled by a peculiar jurisdiction and it's ruled by another peculiar jurisdiction on another nation state, Point is that all these platforms, those ubiquitous platforms, make great profit literally exploring and finding all the gray line between the national jurisdiction. So finding all the empty spaces in which they can somehow develop such according to the classical Zygmunt Bauman metaphor of the liquid society, finding literally as a liquid, as a fluid, an empty space of regulation and building their power upon that. Just to give you an example, Google for sure is one of the best advertisement, probably the ultimate advertisement company on earth, but since a few years ago, didn't pay a cent on taxation about advertisement, because they defined their core business as being a search engine. But I mean, the whole search engine is grounded on the fact that they are profiling a consumer, as well as it's a minor platform, but it's a giant on the end of tourism. Airbnb didn't pay any taxes, any property taxes on the real estate market, because they put themselves on the role of just being on as an intermediary role on the market. But fact is that Airbnb took less than 2 years to have the same number of rooms available on Earth as Hilton hotel chain, that it took 50 years of time to have the number of room Airbnb reached in just 2 years. The point is that platformization and the process of digitalization is a process of streamlining efficiency at the level of the speed of light, we guess to say, if we want to quote, Fukuyama and, of course, Belillo. Let me scroll my slide if I can. Okay. The second point about platformization process, and that's very important, is that we have three main features of platform, or let's say three main kind of platform that are considerable according to what is Jean Van Dyck metaphor of the tree. So let's imagine a tree, and a tree as a structure, I mean as a digital structure, is made upon three main elements. We have the roots, the trunk, and the branches. So let's see and let's imagine what are the roots. The roots are the digital infrastructure that literally hardwire our context, that allow us to be connected on the internet in general. It's crucial and is literally one of the most important geopolitical element at the moment, discussing and defining which 5G network Europe has to adopt, as well as India, US has to adopt. Of course, US wish to adopt an American owned 5G network, but like the idea of the 5G network as a fundamental infrastructure is definitely a core element in order to understand the path that the development, the industrial development, but not just the industrial development, will take a certain nation state or a certain context in the near future, because I mean those 5G network, as well as the networked cables and hard wires that connect our homes to the internet, just to give you very few examples, are the very fundamental infrastructure of the modern digital society, as these were the bridges, the roads, the factory during the industrial revolution. I mean, those infrastructure work exactly at the same and play exactly the same role. So literally, roughly speaking, the better connection you have, the better opportunity you have to be in touch with other people, being connected, making profit, having information, because information is power nowadays, So that's the point. Then we have the so-called trunk platform. The Van Dyck called them the core platform, or we can define them as the ubiquitous platform we have seen before in the slide before. But the point is that upon this core platform, literally evolves a wide array of branches platform that are the so-called sectoral apps and sectoral platform that take advantage of the digital infrastructure provided by the core platforms, and then spread into each and every sector of human life, like consumption, finance, news, healthcare, mobility, education, and so on and so forth, are all branches grounded upon the trunk of the ubiquitous platform. Just to give you a quick example, most, I would not say all, but most of the city municipality on earth rely on Google Map about what is the mobility, the system of mobility of the public infrastructure, such as bus and so on and so forth, because this platform already provide the best and effective system to track information about the traffic jam, to find the earliest and the fastest path to reach point A and point B, and so on and so forth. The problem is that, I mean, just to give you the example of the city of Bologna, relying on a private corporation infrastructure means that for sure there is an unbalanced relationship of power between the private corporation and the public municipality. It's literally a very important political issue. The debate, I think, also has to be drifted toward the direction of what always Van Dijk calls about public-owned platform. I mean, the point is, for sure, Google Map is the best and the ultimate system of mapping available on Earth, but it's not the only one available. There are also public service of mapping like OpenMap, OpenStreetMap, and other platforms that, of course, are probably less evident because are less user-friendly, but they are taking a completely different approach according to the market-driven approach that the ubiquitous platform are trying to impose us, okay? So I want to skip the slide you have seen for just 1 second, just to highlight your attention to what will be my topic in the second part of the discussion. So discussing about presumption. The presumer is definitely a subject that is both enabled and exploited in the process of creating value throughout the platform. And as I told you before, like platforms are literally finding and exploring all the gray area between the jurisdiction of nation state in order to make profit and maximize their profit. More than that, what is happening is a process of what Giorgio defined putting the consumer to work that began literally in the era of the first globalization on the 1990 and the mechanization era. So giving the consumer the responsibility of accomplishing small tasks that are not run anymore by employee, but by consumer. And this, which is super evident in the digital society, leads to what is defined as the process of creating user-generated content. User-generated content are all the information we produce in order to feed the platforms. You know, our comment on Facebook, as well as our purchase history on Amazon or our research on Google, as I said, are elements that are monitored and recorded by platform in order to make out and extract profit to their advantage. So that's point is that it's very important for consumer, and it's way better to say prosumer, which is the merging between producer and consumer, to claim for their very fundamental role in this process, because these people are literally the engine, the fuel of the whole digital revolution or platform society movement, in which most of the tasks we are accomplishing are made toward the direction of providing us a service. And this happened not just on the domain of the consumption, like you need to have a new contract with your cable company, and you do everything by your own throughout a web page or whatever it is, you know, through a link, through a WhatsApp chat, or whatever system and infrastructure the corporation decide to use. More than that, we are doing and taking this interaction also with very fundamental structure of the modernity, which were the bank. Most of us are more and more having digital interaction through with their bank and ATM machine more than with a teller, and talking with in-person operator as an example. And that is mostly what carry on part of labor, part of activity under our personal responsibility without any human mediation. That's a fundamental transformation. We more and more are having interaction between platforms, and we are dependent on platform. We are, but that's a completely other discourse. And I think great Loving will find a better word than mine to describe how much we are literally stuck on the platform. So dependent on a system of control that literally rules our behavior and our interaction with social structure in general. Lastly, I would like to emphasize that this approach is mostly connected also to our interaction with public administration in general and nation state, in order to reduce cost and maximizing efficiency, because at the very end, the whole and the ultimate purpose of modernity is maximizing efficiency, reducing cost, and streamline the whole process. The process of digitalization enhance this transformation throughout the use of the platform and the free labor of the prosumer, or in the other hand, we can say of the citizen, if we are talking about the interaction between a city and the public administration or the healthcare system and so on and so forth. We are more and more forced to perform ourselves certain operations that in the recent past were run mostly by professionals. Think about, and just to give you a quick and rough example, about the COVID-19 pandemic and the COVID test. Now you can have your test by your own, take a picture, or at least this is happening in our region from 6 months and on. You take your own text, you scan a QR code of the test with the outcome of the test, you send it to the center of data analysis, which control if you are positive or negative, and then you are allowed to go to office or whatever, or otherwise, if you are positive, to quarantine. So that's a very important element in the process of prosumption and in the process of merging digitalization together with physical world. These that you can see here are basically the basic reading on the domain of prosumer literature, and I kindly suggest you to at least have a check about a couple of them in order to understand the process of evolution of the prosumer. I would like to say more of the digital prosumer. So we were going to start from Alvin Toffler, the third wave, to George Ritter, the mechanization, Philip Kotler, and then, of course, the marketization of the prosumer movement, the Christian Fuchs and the neo-Marxist approach about the alienation, exploitation, and the prosumer, Henry Jenkins about the convergence culture and the power of the fan as active subject enhancing the value of a brand throughout their labor and their passion, the passion they put on the increased domain, the increased activity on a certain practice related to a brand or to a certain consumer practice. To Lawrence Lessig and the remix culture, so basically the fundamental element of the so-called user-generated content. To Jeremy Rifkin, the zero marginal cost society, coming at the very end to Bossman and Roger and the early stages of the so-called sharing economy and digital society, which is also, I think, a very likely form of prosumption in which the sharing is part of putting and recognizing value of the free labor of the prosumer in the so-called sharing economy manifesto titled "What is mine is yours: the rise of the collaborative consumption." And after this broader introduction, I would like to give the word to Jillet or to anyone who has question. I will stop sharing my screen immediately. So if you have question and you would like me to stress or clarify something, feel free to ask, or feel free to comment and criticize whatever you want. I mean, we have to increase our process of thinking and reflecting upon those topics in this section and in this lesson. If no one wish to say something, I give the floor to Jillet that we talk about digital money in general, and then we have a debate at the very end. So it's up to you.
Yes, I would like to focus on an issue that you highlighted, Pierre. So you talked about the use of public platforms, also not only private platforms, to reach some services and citizens. But I was wondering, in the view of the citizen as prosumer, so in a towards a smart city in its best perspective of accessible services and efficient transport services, etc. Maybe the self-tracking by citizens could be the best solution in this way to provide services and get data to make the city the smartest as possible. But do you think that this relationship between the prosumer and the public platform will reach the same win-win condition of like benefiting from private platforms such as maps, who already have good services and an amount of data allowing to a really efficient relationship with the prosumer, the citizens? So do you think that this could be a kind of obstacle compared to a more long-term result with some public platforms that maybe need to gather more data?
Well, let me say this is a great question, and I think that for sure the political debate has to drive its attention about the so-called clash between public and private platforms, which will happen sooner or later. And I think that in the time of 2 years at most, this will be one of the most important topic on the global political agenda, you know. And the point is, as you perfectly highlighted, that the process of gathering data run by these huge private corporation, private platform, has been super effective because it has adopted several tactics and strategy, such as the gamification and so on, in order to literally please exploit the free labor of consumer. But then, of course, they want to make out money about that, and that's, of course, makes sense from their point of view, because at the very end, those are private corporations. But at the end, for sure, there will be an agreement between public and private sector. What I'm saying that is that on one end, at the moment, the balance between the power of the private sector and the public sector is completely unbalanced on the end of the private platforms. And this is, by some extent, unfair. That's what I want to say. That's a very fundamental point. Then, of course, I'm not a futurologist and I don't want to even be that. But for sure, there is the urgency of a political debate upon that, exactly as there has been an urgency about the so-called digital divide debate that arose completely evident at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I mean, digital divide was already there. Eventually, even COVID-19 didn't happen. That's the point. And I mean, of course, COVID-19 was, is, and will be a factor even for the future. But what I would like to say about COVID-19 is that more than being a game-changing moment in the process of digitalization, which it is what I'm focused on, is more a magnifier about the process of transition toward the digital society. That's a point, you know. It just highlighted and made things way more evident than they were. I mean, Zoom meeting and as well as remote teaching and so on and so forth were already there way before COVID-19, you know. That's a point. Okay, thank you, Laura, for your question in a way.
Thank you.
The point, I mean, at the very end, I haven't concluded my, let's say, comment, but at the very end is the challenge is find a way to rebalance the power between private corporation platform and the public platform, which at the moment are non-existent mostly, you know.
So you think that an option could be just a cooperation between the two?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jillet, you have a question?
Actually, more of an observation. I really loved that you had brought in that tree metaphor from Van Dijk's work, because I really think that, for instance, the connection that is drawn between the public and private through this techno-social artifact of the platform is very important for us to consider. Apart from that, actually, if you think about even the way in which different platforms function, rather than platforms in themselves, we can also think of the platform society or a platform ecosystem. Today, as you have correctly, when we saw that image of the GAFAM, if you take a look at each of those platforms, they are connected, I mean, to each other and also to this variety of platforms amongst themselves. So these are these bundles of platforms. So I just wanted to remark that I thought that this metaphor of a tree is really helpful in trying to understand those interconnections, which we should be aware of.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, that you use the perfect word, like the idea of platform ecosystem is definitely fundamental in order to understand how literally this system is spread and embedded in our context and in our life. I mean, most of the time we are literally interacting with platform without also being aware of interacting with the platform. That also is kind of it's kind of an importance, because those platforms, I mean, they play a very evident role in the complexification of our society, but also as they play also a stealth role. They are literally like in blurred space and blurred line, and we have to be more aware. I mean, the awareness is fundamental in order to understand the context that is completely changed. And I think that probably the idea of the prosumer in general and prosumption has had little success because there hasn't been the awareness of being prosumer and the importance of being prosumer, you know. That's very important, and the idea of the awareness is fundamental. I don't want to quote Karl Marx, but what is missing in the digital modernity is exactly like worker of the world united, and the idea of prosumer of the world united is not such an unimaginable thing, you know, and that's for sure gave the opportunity to platform to explore level of exploitation never experimented in times before. So those are my 2 cents literally and my contribution for today.
Let's see if we have any more questions or comments.
Yeah. Okay, looks like there are no questions. Would you like to take a break, or we're gonna go straight? Whatever is good for you.
I don't know. I can do either. Should we check in with everyone in the room? What would you prefer? Do we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I think that we have also a pool function on Zoom. I found something like that a few days ago. And so we can start a pool. Just give me 1 second. And we can share a pool about that's one. Never used it, but
there's always a first time, I guess.
okay, I don't know how to share it, but I've created the pool. I don't know how to launch it.
We could do should we do the old-fashioned show of hands? How many people?
Also, the old school way is always good, but
raise your hands while we figure out the poll function.
I set it up, but I don't know how it works.
Okay, in the event that I cannot see a lot of hands going up, then maybe we can just continue and power through, because I think there are very important continuities between what you have stated, Pierre, and some of the points that I want to bring up. So honestly, I do not have such a beautiful presentation like Pierre. It's really I intended to be a series of observations and really a discussion amongst all of us. But I think we can start with the point where this discussion right before us, where we were talking about the idea of looking at platform society as really an ecosystem. So as a sociologist in my own studies, I have been looking at both things, sort of looking at design and the intention behind these techno-social systems, and also how, what are the user practices, which means how do people actually interact with these systems, okay? So when we think of the platform platform ecosystems, one of the things that really comes across very forcefully is how over time what has happened is that proficiency in using certain types of money, by that I mean primarily digital money, has become really tied into your ability to negotiate even the most basic of platforms. Okay, so for instance, very strangely today morning I woke up and I checked my mail, and immediately there was this message coming from Gmail and Google Drive saying, you have to get more storage, otherwise you're going to be locked out. And what does it mean to be locked out of something like Gmail or Google Drive? It really meant that really the entirety of my years as a PhD student, quite a few years that I have been sort of, teaching, a lot of, access to all of that data would have been gone. So of course, Pierre, we can see the poll finally. Yay, we figured it out. So I said, okay, yes, clearly I want to do this. And immediately, in order to access all that and retain my access to my own data, I had to figure out how to pay for this, to retain this data that I myself had generated over the past, let's say 15 odd years. Okay. And this is not a very simple financial process. It required me to be well versed with different types of different types of cards, different types of options that I could use to do this. It required me to be aware of the regulatory framework in the location that I am placed in, which is in India. because certain types of financial transactions are not, for instance, automatic payments. There is certain types of automatic payments are allowed and permitted by the regulator in India, and other types of automatic payments are, there's a as a user, you will have to go in and okay certain transactions and not okay certain transactions. So through this very simple example, what I wanted to tell you was that a certain sort of competence in digital money is increasingly required when it comes to using a variety of different platforms. Here we've just taken two examples, so an ability to use digital money and to use this one gigantic platform. But we may also see that certain, as we were talking about the nesting of some platforms with each other or within each other. For instance, what happens when you need to access, let's say, health data or certain sorts of public health care, you need to be able to combine the use of multiple platforms. Okay, so and for that, your ability to negotiate payments in these multiple platforms are connected to finally accessing healthcare. So these are some considerations because of which we thought that it is a good idea when talking about emerging platform society to start looking at the role of money and what happens to money when it comes to platforms, the emerging platform society. So to begin with, I think, in fact, if we think about, maybe we can take a minute to even think about how do we define what is a platform or even presumption. Okay, an important aspect of that, maybe we can just go around the room and even think about it, is to see how there has been progressively in platform society the monetization of activities which were earlier not brought into the purview of the money economy. Okay, so here I'm combining the idea of value and its potential monetization, but it certainly bears thought, right? So for instance, giving my friend some feedback about, let's say, the new clothes they wore, that's not something that was earlier monetized, but we are really through platforms fast being socialized into this idea that there is monetary value attached to this kind of a feedback, right? So when we talk about presumption and the idea of putting the consumer to work, this is a way in which we are collectively putting many people to work and there's money generated out of it. Apart from that, of course, I think we also have to consider how when we talk about money, and the reason why I said that, my intention is to start with really considering different types of money. So when we think of platforms, I think one thing we need to be careful about is not to consider only digital money. If you have been following our events over the past year or so, you would have, been introduced to the work of various scholars who have done fantastic work in showing us the distinction between data monies. Very recently, we had Kore Chaliskan who gave a wonderful talk on that. We also the question of the translation of physical money, which it may be currency notes or coins, etc., into digital money through the use of platforms. So for your reference, there is a really amazing video where we captured a talk by Dr. Suniva Sanbant, who gave us this example from Indonesia, where she showed us how through the use of ride-hailing apps, the drivers are expected to become human infrastructure which supports they're like human ATMs, right? Where you give in physical money, and through their own activity and work, for which they never paid enough, that gets translated into digital money. Okay, so these are just some of the dimensions of the connection between money and platforms that I really want to make you aware of today. Another aspect that we can consider when, particularly because we spoke about the point of putting the consumer to work, is this, this is more on the design end. It's the kind of traces of yourself and the data that you generate that really become very, very visible to a variety of stakeholders when it comes to the use of your money. So for instance, we can start with a question, right? So let us say you use any sort of payment app. You're really leaving behind a lot of different traces. Even if you're not even using a payment app, let's say you made a purchase on Amazon and you paid money in some way. Let's say some guy turned up at your door. In India, this is a very common way of doing transactions. You place the order on the platform, and then the person turns up at the door for delivery, and you hand over physical cash. Okay. However, a very detailed sort of a catalog of your activities over the years has been collected and built up in the memory of the platform, and very interestingly also shared with other stakeholders. Can you think of who these stakeholders might be? Who might be interested in your financial data in this way?
Credit institutions.
Sorry, Abhiram, could you just speak louder?
Credit institutions.
Sorry, can you? I was not able to hear you clearly.
Are you talking with me? I wasn't saying anything.
No, Abhiram. Sorry, Abhiram. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. So Abhiram meant credit institutions. Okay. Yes. So people who want to sell you credit would certainly be interested in these traces of your data. Who else might be interested in the traces of financial data that is created through your interaction with platforms? Apart from, yes, let's say, there are banks and other financial institutions or fintech apps which want to sell you loans. Sure, they're interested. Anyone else who might be interested in your financial activities?
I don't know, maybe Amazon itself, just to know better the consumers and their habits and tendencies to pay, how much and
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, we had a really great talk by Sophie Mutzel, who elaborated on this point, so this becomes a data point for the platforms themselves to understand, okay, what kind of activity, how do we really, I remember when once I was teaching some PG students, and we were talking about the culture industries, so such an old concept. And, there was this vision that was painted of how through the culture industries, you really can pigeonhole each consumer into very neat slots, right? The typology of the consumer. And really something like the trace of your monetary activity, what kinds of consumption do you end up doing, or in pairs or even prosumption that you end up doing. It's a great way to actually survey what kind of demand exists for which kind of data. So sure, okay, the platform itself may be interested, or supermarkets, whatever, different sorts of people who want to sell you different things. Anyone else who might be interested in your financial data? What about the state? Do you think the state would be interested in your financial data? Yes, certainly. Your revenue points for the state itself, right? So, so if the state can, the sort of transactions that could happen through cash, or because transactions on a platform are not only about cash, but it's also about documentation of the transaction, right? Which means that, and I'm so glad that we have people from, on the one hand, India, and on the other hand, Italy, because you understand what I say when I mean that there are a lot of transactions in our economy which are not, which are sort of, for the large part, outside of the purview of the calculations of the state, what we often refer to as shadow or informal economies. So if these sort of transactions happen through platforms, even if the payment is made in cash, it's not really the same as walking up to a shop physically and just giving them cash. Because when you're engaged with platforms, there is a way also that the activity of the consumer is being tracked, right? And that is all data that is going to be used by the state to know its citizens better, to know activities within its borders better, which may or may not involve people that it even identifies as citizens. So for instance, Jain and Gabor, they specialize in the study of accounting. They have really a wonderful series of papers on the use of digital money and the state and the kind of tracking that they have been doing, also through the use of platforms. So really, when we think about money and its link to platforms, we have to consider what different types of monies are used, what are the variety of activities that get monetized, what are the sort of translations of money that also come into play by this sort of ever-expanding platform ecosystem that we are increasingly, whether we like it or not, in some ways being attached to. This also brings me to the point of user practices. What do we mean by whether we like it or not, we become a part of the platform ecosystem? Let me start by your own experiences and understandings. Can you think of people who, even if they don't want to be a part of the platform society, they end up being a part of the platform society?
Just shops, just to do advertisement, and even though, for example, the owner of the shop doesn't like the idea of having the data or an account, you have to have an account for your shop in order to succeed, at least a bit.
Yeah, that's a great example. Anyone else? This could be a question about, one way to interpret my question is to think, okay, this is a question of choice, right? Does someone choose to become part of the platform society, or do you have no choice about the matter? The second direction I also hope this question takes you towards is to take a close look at the people around you and see, there are certain types of people we think are associated with platforms, but really through some amazing research that I've been doing with Pierre, we have found how, conventionally some types of people we think have nothing to do with platforms are also through long chains part of the platform society. So either ways, can you think of someone who either does not want to be part of, does not want to participate in platforms, but is compelled to do so? We can start with that question. So Laura just gave us an example of, how if you're running certain businesses, you have no choice but to be part of the platforms. Can you think of other examples? Yes, Kalpesh, go ahead.
So, hello. Yeah. So I think in case of India, we can see especially the poor people do not want, it's not like when Aadhaar was introduced, Aadhaar. So that time it was not like everybody wanted to be part of that Aadhaar and wanted to have Aadhaar card, use their Aadhaar card to access the public distribution, ration and everything. But it was state who wanted these people to be part of that system. So I think that can be one of the examples where we can look how the state is imposing certain platforms in people's life.
Yeah, so when we think of public platforms, for instance, are they necessarily, I loved Pierre's talk where he said, I don't want to start the conversation with, is this good or is this bad? So for instance, even when we talk about public platforms, is it necessarily going to be beneficial for the citizen? That's something that we have to consider, right? For instance, I mean, so let's move the conversation beyond, is this good or is this bad? So I think it helps us to see the detail on the ground better. For instance, all of us, I think, by now have heard of COVID-19 and the vaccinations, whether we want it or not, the vaccination drives around COVID-19, right? So if you think of how you have, I'm assuming at least some of you have gotten vaccinations done. In India, it is, you can book for these vaccinations on a public platform, okay? They also have walk-in centers where people of varying ages, particularly the elderly, can walk in, and or people in rural areas can just walk into vaccination centers and get the vaccine. Now, whether or not, irrespective of the way you chose to do this, the trace of your vaccination is going to be part of that larger health platform that the state has, right? So that could be another way in which we think of people, how do people really get drawn into the platform society, whether they like it or not, right? And now, because vaccination is going to be, it's turning towards the paid category of vaccinations, that's a great intersection, actually. Sorry, Kalpesh, you were going to add something.
No. I just wanted to add one point. Like, for instance, the use of Arogya Setu app. Like, if you want to travel by air, through railways, you need to have an Arogya Setu app installed in your phone, and you need to update your COVID vaccination details and everything. Then you can travel. So that is also one way. In one way, we can see the question of choice, whether do I have a choice, or it's like I have to do this. I have to install this and to make some travels. Yeah.
Yes. So again, what are you as a data subject, whether or not you formally choose to associate yourself with the platform, really is the question, is the thing that we need to think about, right? Abhiram, you wanted to add something?
No, I'm just like through gamification also, this like we are drawn into the platform. So I just wanted to mention that point.
Can you elaborate this a little bit? Because I was going to come to gamification, but if it's going in that direction, great. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So it's not like Kalpesh mentioned the point of choice. So by giving an opportunity to earn money through installing these platforms also draws people, like by choice also people get into this. Like it's not we are forced into it. Like we have some opportunity of choice also, like in case of other platforms like Google Pay or Phone Pay, which like if we like there is an option like if we share to 5 people and they install this app, you will get 250 rupees and all. So it allows an opportunity as well for like sharing it with your social connections and then earning a money. People by choice also say like get into these platforms.
Yes. Okay. Maybe choice was not the wisest thing, because it's never as simple as free will. I'm not a big believer in free will also, but I think the more appropriate term that we can think of really is what is happening at the level of users. So this example that you gave is such a great example, right? So if you get 5 people more onto to sign on to Google Pay through giving a reference, or we can take a different example. Let's say you get 5 of your friends to join in and work for Zomato or Uber, then you're going to get money, right? So this aspect of gamification is actually a very important one. But here we can consider the kind of, I would say, some sort of strategic maneuvering that people do as part of their everyday negotiations and engagements with platforms. and the way in which money will come into the picture, right? So are people going to be completely, it's that old Weberian image of the iron cage. Are we really locked in and we have no choice about how we are going to engage with the platform society? Or do people in their own ways try to game a different sort of gamification, but do they try to game particularly the financial aspects of platforms? So that is something that we should consider. I think when we also take a look at this from the perspective of the users, for instance, we in different ways, I have drawn your attention to the design of these platforms and how the idea is that user data is valuable. Okay, through Zuboff's work, even the talk that Mutsil gave, we are not only the generators of data, but really the data that we generate on platforms is going to be, the design is such that they will be used to control us or control our activities going ahead in the future. Have you paid the loan, the installment on your car? And that will determine, okay, can you even drive that car or not, right? Or are you going to get your next installment? So it's really that sort of wonderful interconnectedness and the clever interconnectedness that we can see in the design of platforms. On the other hand, when it comes to financial platforms, for instance, there's a certain kind of valence, which means watching, that users themselves prefer, right? So for instance, let's say we have instances where people like to use, Google Pay or some sort of a platform which will help them deal with digital money for the specific convenience that it will help them budget better. Okay, so when we speak about being watched through our financial activities on platforms, in some cases, that kind of watching is something that users themselves would like, right? So in some ways, it is a kind of self-watching that you're directing yourself to. And there is also really amazing work on that kind of, on the use of platforms and money for this kind of budgeting, everyday budgeting that happens at the level of individuals or at the level of households. I think because we have spoken about gamification and money, I would quickly, I think, want to speak a little bit about the question of, okay, so when we think of platforms and the connection to money, one of the main reasons why we chose to actually include it in this discussion on emerging platform societies was the way in which it socialized people into the use of certain types of money, right? So the idea is that as we, it's a two-way sort of process. As you gain certain competences in the use of digital money, you may be better socialized into using different types of platforms. Or it could be that through using digital platforms, you become comfortable enough that you start to use different types of money. So that kind of socialization is certainly something that we are thinking of. And across the world, in various parts, in various countries, you will also see that there is a very interesting push towards, in various parts of the world, I think the common term that will be used is financial inclusion, right? So the idea is that there are still many people who are not part of formal financial structures or the platform economy, and really through the use of financial platforms, we can really bring them into the fold of people who are part of formal financial structures. Now, the point I want to make here is that I'm hoping that some of our discussions through the week also enable us to look at this category of financial inclusion much more clearly. So soon the question will become not whether you are included in the emerging platform society or as a financial subject in this emerging platform society, but what are the conditions of your inclusion, right? So, because of course, you know, the sort of, if you are really this, you are really the product in Zubov's words, right? So if you are the product, then clearly there is going to be an effort to draw you in as much as possible. So the question again, as Pierre said, it's not a question of the digital divide. There are some people who are outside the platform society or outside the fold of the formal banking system, but the terms on which you are included and what are the plans for what to do once you are included in the system. Okay, so I'm hoping that some of these observations will help you think a little bit about exactly how are you included, what happens when you become included into the emerging platform society. Another question that you can think of is, do people act exactly in the way platforms are designed for them to act, or are there other ways in which they create a little wiggle room for themselves? That may be, you know, something as simple as sharing your Netflix password with 10 friends, okay? Or it could be other acts of, I would not want to call it resistance, but just draw our attention to the need to study the way in which people engage with platforms in greater empirical detail. I'll stop here now, and I would be happy to take on any questions or comments that we can use to take the conversation forward.
Yeah, I have just a reflection when you were talking about the tracing transaction interest for the state, so who's interested in tracing the data, etc. And I was thinking about, and also obviously the platform inclusion from the financial side. I was thinking about during COVID in Italy, there was this initiative of the state of the cashback. So doing electronic payments to be traced, so also in order to avoid the evasion of taxes, etc., you'd be rewarded with a percentage. And also those who would have done more transactions in this way would have had an even greater reward. And I think that I was just thinking when you talked about the platform inclusion and the conditions, that maybe that was the greater moment of interaction by Italian citizens with a like public administration platform, because we are not so used in that sense. Actually, there are some obstacles right now. But yeah, that moment maybe was the greater interaction by the citizens with a financial institution platform from the state. So this blurring of services and digital payments was really linked to a relationship with the state through a platform that you could access only with a digital identity recognized by all the state institutions. So I was just, this brought into my mind when you talked about platform ecosystem with the financial transactions, etc.
Thank you, Lara. I think that's a great example, you know, because if really, like, conventionally we think of gamification as this evil plot by corporates to get at you, but really this practice is really spread out so extensively. And also, you know, how does, and that's the reason why I hesitate to really use the term choice, you know. So would you want to be, would you not want to be, under what conditions are you enticed into becoming part of the platform ecosystem? But thanks, I think that is a really great example.
Thank you.
Pierre, you have something to add here?
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you, Jillet, for your interesting debate. And I would like to ask you further information about the idea of share, you talked about the fact that people are sharing their account, like Netflix account and so on and so forth. Let's say mostly it's the idea of mutual cooperation of users, literally finding the gray area that the platform are using on the macro scale. People are using, let's say, on the micro level, taking some personal advantage and using creativity in the spaces that are left there for their own availability. And by some extent, I think that we have also to reflect about the fact that this opportunity of sharing, your password is also kind of a marketing move sometimes. And the more time will go on, the less there will be such opportunity for users to. But for sure, I mean, user will find other way and creative way to find trick and process of adoption of technology. But the point is related to the process, let's say, of sharing account. And the fact that there is a parallel process. On one end, we have a structured and formalized way of doing that. And I'm talking about corporation, society doing that for purpose and even for profit. And I'm thinking about like Together Price, which is a platform which is very popular and give you the opportunity of getting in touch with people and then literally and technically split the bill. And so we have those, let's say, formal approach. And on the other hand, the informal approach. So let's say the human-driven approach, that is literally the in-person sharing of account. And on the other hand, the algorithmic approach, so the institutionalized one made out from platform. Have you some insight about that?
Yeah, I actually tend to think of these as almost like a feedback loop. Because I think over the past couple of years, the different papers that we've been thinking about, for instance, I remember in 2020 when we did the work where we were looking at how elderly had started to become part of the platform society in Bologna and in Kolkata. We found that, people would ask neighbors for help when it came to the use of platforms. And very soon, I mean, I think maybe as we were writing that paper, suddenly, we see that Amazon has created this option for you, So if a delivery comes, would you like for it to be kept with your neighbor, So I really think that this is, and similarly, of course, also with, password sharing or maybe platforms which help you, financial platforms would say, okay, we'll help you with splitting the bill. Right? I really think that it's important for us to look at these user practices, not only out of sociological interest, but because these practices become the stuff of corporate policy, in the near future. So for any student of platforms, I think it would be interesting to keep an eye on what user practices are and how they become, in some ways, incorporated into the platform society very, very soon. So yes, as a feedback loop.
Thank you, Jillet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or
Any other question, comment from the room? No one.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
Let me just check with the students from India. Abhiram, do you have a question or a comment you'd like to add?
Yes, ma'am. I'm audible. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes. Yeah, you're audible.
Ma'am, you were mentioning about the interconnectedness of platforms. So I just want to check that, like, is it like the same concept as stack economization that you're mentioning, like one economic activity created in a platform is laying the foundation for the other to occur. So is that the interconnectedness that you're mentioning, or is it something else?
Yes, it's not necessarily, I think this is a concept that Corey has written quite a bit about, right? The idea of static anonymization, and particularly the way in which it comes into play in the data money and related platforms. Okay, so there he sees it as a very causal sort of link. So you need one activity to happen for the other to take place successively. Here, when I spoke about the interconnectedness of platforms, I also thought of it, it's not, in some cases, yes. So for instance, perhaps you need to make yourself familiar with certain financial platforms in order to be able to do some of the most basic things, right? So you have to have your internet banking or your banking platform set up in order to be able to sign up for let's say, a health-based initiative on a platform, or rescuing the loss of your data on something that started off as simply as sending email to people. Okay, so in that way, yes, sometimes this is by design, but other times this is also the way in which platforms themselves grow and modify over time. I refer to both types of connectedness between platforms. Do you have a follow-up, Abhinav?
No.
Okay, just very quickly, I want to check in on Kalpesh as well. Kalpesh, do you have something to add here or to ask?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Avinabha?
No, ma'am.
All right. I think we are all clear on the Indian end. So I think maybe while people might be processing the talks, we can talk a little bit about the structure going forward and where to look for certain resources.
Okay, I think that probably we should also, if there are no questions and no debate, Laura, may you share the schedule of our summer school, like share screen, the schedule of the summer school? We can make a brief introduction about all the event we have planned. It's okay for you, Jillet?
Yes, a moment, and I'll share it. Okay. Okay, here we are. I share my screen. Pierre, it says that you disabled the...
No, I haven't disabled, but it's because you put me as a
host. Yes.
Host, total host. So now you are co-host and
should work.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so this is today.
Enlarge it.
I'm sorry, enlarge it.
Can you zoom it? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yes, so we've just finished this first round, and then we will see later on 3 p.m. Italian time. I think in India it was 9, right? Am I right? Okay. 9 a.m. in India with Stefano Spillare from the University of Bologna.
Sorry to interrupt.
30 p.m.
30 p.m.
India is a red. It's a red alert.
That one, right? Yes. And yeah, he would talk to us about civic networks, from networks to platforms. And yes, so we are really looking forward to his contribution as well.
And just to add to this, some of the faculty are going to be sharing some reading material that they would like for you to read ahead of the class. So
yes.
We will be reaching out to you to share that.
Yes, we send all the participants an email with the article that the articles, the materials that are suggested to be read before getting in the debate, so to augment it a bit more in depth, for sure.
Yeah, and tomorrow we have Cornelia Hahn at 10 a.m. Italian time, and then 12 a.m. we have Jillet with, so may you please pronounce it, Jillet, because...
With Dr. Joanna Szelaka-Jarmuszek from NCU in Poland.
Yeah, and late in the afternoon, 5 p.m. Italian time, we will have Chris Bale from Duke University. So just as a reminder, every afternoon we will send out a newsletter with the event of the day and of the day before, and eventually with reading material and other stuff and useful information about our activity. We will promise you that we will not spam your email box. It will be just one email on the late afternoon, I mean Italian time. And then, of course, feel free to jump in with any comment, any form of interaction would be much than appreciated to us. We wish this to be, firstly, a space of sharing opinion and thought, and of course, give the insight for further analysis and research. And so feel free to join us also in our social channel. We have a website. And so, Laura, if you can share the screen and show and display our website and our future activity. And also, we are also collecting, which is part of our activity, a pretty rich video section in which you will find all the lectures we have had during the coming time. And we have a very high and prestigious international scholar giving their time and their reflection upon platform society. And also we had an amazing international conference on blended mood a couple of weeks ago, in which other than having an interesting roundtable, we had also the precious contribute of Daniel Miller and Sophie Mutzel and other prestigious scholars that you can find available on YouTube and in our web pages. So Jillet, go ahead. I saw your hand raised. Please feel free.
I thought this would be a good time to just check in with everyone in the people who want to participate in the summer school. What kind of participation would help them to take really the most away from the summer school? Just to see what works for them, what doesn't, like, do they want to work with all the cameras on? Because our intention was to actually have the room function like a round table, so where people come together and really have a conversation about a topic. So we just wanted to get a sense of what we can do to help you do this better. If there are any suggestions from you, because I know this is like the first day, just going forward, I think it will help the sessions to move, to progress more smoothly also.
So I think that our time is almost coming to an end. So thank you everybody for attending the first lesson of our summer school. We will meet again today with Stefano Spilo lecture later on, and hope you have appreciated it, and be in touch. Feel free to contact us about everything. We are glad of hosting this summer school, and see you then.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Later.
See you. Bye. Thank you.